Hey guys, welcome back to releasethecraftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. Storycraft is the little segment where I tell you a story and do a craft. And right now I'm doing some Shabby Creep craft because that's hard to say. Shabby Creep crafts. And because it's Shabby Creep month, we're doing Shabby Creep stuff. So definitely check out all the Shabby Creep collaborators. You can follow the hashtag ShabbyCreep24. Check them out and see all the cool creepy things that people are making. This is some of the stuff I'm making. Working my way through all the prompts and stuff. Hope that you guys enjoy this. I am continuing my saga of Vasilisa stories because I brought it up and I told you that I knew of at least 3 different stories of Vasilisa. And so here we are again telling another story of the Russian princess Vasilisa this time. I promise you guys, we're talking about Princess Vasilisa and the Firebird. And you guys, this one frustrates me, but I'll get into why at the end. But it's worth telling. 1, because I mentioned it, and 2, because it's just another take on this, like, long literary saga of Vasilisa, the mythological folklore character, and all of her different iterations and stuff like that. If you're looking for Baba Yaga, she's not going to be in this one. So I'm sorry to disappoint you if that's what you were here for. But trust me, this story is going to be interesting. And don't worry, we will have more Baba Yaga stuff coming down the road. But right now, we're talking Princess Vasilisa and the Firebird. And like I said, this is a Russian fairy tale. Jump into that, but I just want to really quick, because I have to do it now or people don't know, I have a Patreon, and on Patreon I do things like witchy things, and I give away like digitals, and I have a podcast, and I do tarot readings, and all those things, and you can check them out on the link below, and get in on that while the getting is good. Also, I have a Grimoire with me series where we're filling up a bunch of like stuff in our magical books, and we're doing those kind of things, and it's really cool and fun, and I think you guys might like it, so check it out. At any rate, Vasilisa and the Firebird begins like all my good stories begin, in the way, way long ago. And it doesn't just begin in the way, way long ago, it begins in the way, way long ago in a place that we don't even know about. It's a kingdom far, far away, and in this kingdom is a king. Like a kingly king, the kingliest of kings, an older gentleman who happens to have a large kingdom that is full of a bunch of interesting things, including this guy who's an archer, and this archer is super brave. The archer is not the coolest thing about the archer, which is interesting, right? The coolest thing about this particular archer is that he has a horse. And not just any horse. He has a very smart, strong, wise, and fearless horse as well. So the horse is brave, the archer is brave. They're a combo team. They come together. They're one package. And this horse is so special that like nobody else has a horse as cool as this guy's horse. Okay? And you're going to see why. And you're definitely going to be like, maybe this guy doesn't deserve this horse as we go on. So one day the king is like, hey, archers, go out, hunt stuff. We need like food for feast and things like that, right? So the archer goes out with all the other archers. They all go their separate ways. They go into the woods. The archer takes his horse, of course, because they're a team. And they go into the woods to go onto this hunt. And as they're riding, they see a firebird pass overhead. And a firebird is a fiery bird with feathers of gold and flame. And it flew overhead, and onto the ground fell one of its fiery feathers. And, the archer stopped his horse, of course. I'm going to keep saying that because that rhymes and it tickles my childhood spirits. There's more than one spirit in my childhood, apparently. But, the archer gets off the horse to go look at the feather, and it is laying there flaming like it's on fire, but it's not actually like hot fire, and it's not catching anything on fire. It's a magical fire. But it's a beautiful gold feather that's fiery on the ground. And the horse is like, leave that right there on the ground. Do not pick that up, because if you pick it up, something bad is going to happen. And, of course, the archer listens, and he gets back on the horse, and they ride off, and that's the end of the story. It's not. It's not at all. Because the archer goes, well, if I picked up this feather, the king would definitely give me a prize, because this feather is really special and firebirds are really rare, and I definitely should pick it up and give it to the king. Like, that seems like the right thing to do. So he picks it up and he takes it with him. And he gives it to the king. So they get back to the castle. He gives it to the king. He's like, hey, firebird feather. Look how cool it is. Look how magical it is. Gold, shiny, fiery. And the king is like, wow, this is really great. This is amazing. But since you were able to get this feather, why don't you just bring me the firebird? And if you don't bring me the firebird, I'll cut off your head. And the archer goes back out to the stable, back out to his horse, and he is bawling. He's crying so much. And the horse is like, how come you're crying? And the archer's like, the king wants me to get the firebird now that I've given him the feather. Because for some reason, finding a feather on the ground is the same as being able to hunt and track down a mythical creature. And the horse is like, I fucking told you. I told you that bad things would happen if you picked up that feather. But don't worry. Don't worry. I know what to do. You're not in any danger. But I just want you to know, because you've done this, more and more bad things are going to happen to you. So this isn't the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. So go back to the king and ask him for 100 bags of corn to be strewn out into the field. And the archer's like, okay, that's a really weird random request, but I don't have any solutions to my harrowing problem that was caused by not listening to you in the first place. So yeah, I'm just gonna do what you tell me to. So to his credit, the archer does. He goes and tells the king, like, hey, I need 100 bags of corn. I need them in that field over there in particular. You want the firebird, make it happen. And the king is like, yeah, okay. I do want the firebird. So the king has that happen. So dawn, the following morning, the archer goes out there with his horse. He unbridles the horse and lets the horse, like, run around and do all of his stuff. He hides behind a tree. And then there's this huge wind that comes, like, from the forest and then across the fields, and the sea starts to kick up, and then all of a sudden there's the firebird. The firebird comes flying back over again, and it sees this field of free food, right? And it's like, whoa, that's a lot of food. So the firebird settles down and starts to eat away, and as soon as it does, the archer's horse shows up and steps on one of its wings so that it can't fly away. And then the archer comes out from behind the trees where he was hiding and ties up the firebird with a rope, gets on the horse, and goes back to the palace. And then once he gets there, he's like, ta-da, I caught the uncatchable, the mythical, the magical, the firebird. Here you go, king. Now I'm just going to go back home and pretend like none of this ever happened and I'm not making any more bad decisions. And the king's like, you know what? Since you were able to do this and you did it so quickly and so well, I want to marry this girl. Her name is Princess Vasilisa, and she lives on the other side of the earth, where the sun rises. So bring her back to me. I want to marry her. If you bring her to me, I will make you rich, but if you don't, I'll take my own sword and cut off your head. So the archer goes back out to the stables and he's crying again, and he's like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. And the horse is like, how come you're crying this time? What happened? Was the king not particularly grateful for the impossible task that you did with my help? And the archer's like, you can't believe it, but this guy wants me to go find this mythical princess across the world. And the horse is like, yeah, I told you. I told you that worse things would happen. I actually told you that, and you picked up the dang feather anyways. But don't worry, I have a solution for this too. So go back to the king and ask him for a gold top tent and food and drink for you to take on the journey with you. So the archer goes back to the king and he's like, hey, I need a tent topped with gold, if you just happen to have one of those lying around. And I need enough food and drink for me to take this journey. I can't just do this on an empty stomach. And the king's like, that's pretty reasonable. Yeah, I can do that. Also, I'm a king. Of course I have a tent topped in gold. I got you, buddy. Bring me back that princess. And the archer's like, yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, no problem. So he goes off. And they ride, the archer and the horse, ride across the land. They go beyond the great beyond, right? Like, they're riding forever, it feels like. The direct quote from the story is, beyond thrice 9 lands. So 3 times 9. So they went past 27 lands. And nobody knows how long it took. Like, that's how far you went. They were like, it could have been short, it could have been long. We don't really know because we don't have ways to measure time in this time. It's so far ago. And he went so far that, like, how do you measure that? In parsecs. So he finally gets to where the sun rises out of the sea, and when he gets there, he sees that on the sea is a little silver boat being pushed by a paddle made of gold, and the person rowing the little boat is a princess. It's Princess Vasilisa, and he's like a little bit stunned when he sees her, a little bit like struck dumb, because she's so freaking beautiful, guys. She has a long, beautiful black hair that is braided down to her waist. She looks like the prettiest person you can think of times 3. Like, she's immaculately beautiful. She looks like she belongs there, rowing a silver and gold boat by where the sun rises from the ocean. That's exactly what she looks like. The fairy taleist of fairy tale princesses right there. And while she's there, he like is, you know, finally comes to his senses. The horse is like, stop doing shenanigans. He gets off his horse, he unbridles the horse, lets the horse, you know, do what it wants to do, and he sets up the tent and puts the food and the drink that he brought with him, which apparently he didn't touch at all, or maybe just a little bit, but he had enough for this. He sets it all up on a table and then sits down to eat and drink while he waits for Princess Vasilisa. And Princess Vasilisa is out there rowing her boat, having a good old time. And as the sun rises, it catches the top of the golden tent, and she sees it sort of, you know, glimmering out there on the shore, and she's like, huh, I wonder what's going on over there. That's pretty. That's shiny. I like pretty shiny things. Obviously, because I'm in a silver and gold boat. So she rows back up to the shore, and she comes over, and she's like, hey, I love your tent. And the archer's like, hey, are you Princess Vasilisa? And she's like, I am, actually. He's like, hey, I brought some food and some wine from a faraway land if you want to try it and just, you know, have like a good afternoon picnicking with me. And she's like, I happen to love a picnic. I would love to do that with you. So she sits down and she eats and she drinks with the archer, and they're having a good time. They're talking, they're chatting it up, and she's like, wow, everything is so new and exciting. What is this, a spice? I've never had that. So she's like really interested. But eventually she makes it to the bottom of the glass of wine, and she gets a little bit tipsy, a little bit in her cups, you know what I mean? And eventually just falls asleep at the table. So the archer calls his horse, it comes running up, they fold up the tent with the top of gold, and he picks up Vasilisa and jumps onto the horse, and they ride away. And apparently the way back, as you know, the way back is wont to do, was a lot faster than the way there. So they make it back in no time flat, before Vasilisa can even, you know, bat an eyelid awake. And when they get to the castle, the king is like super excited. He's like, oh my god, I cannot believe this. You brought me the woman of my literal dreams. I've only heard stories about her because we don't have TV or the internet in this time, so I had no idea what she looked like, but she's even prettier than I thought she was, and I'm just so excited that you served me so well. I'm gonna give you a promotion and a bunch of gold and a bunch of silver, and shit, I'll give you like a brand new saddle for your horse, because I know how close you guys are, and it's not weird or strange that you're always talking to your horse and doing strange things, because you're so effective. It's I'll just overlook it, the strangeness of that. And while the king is like gushing over the archer, Princess Vasilisa awakes, and she looks around, and she realizes that she's nowhere near the deep blue sea that she knows and loves and is, you know, her home, and she starts to cry, and her face goes absolutely red. Like, she's an ugly crier, guys. You can't be super perfect, pretty, and beautiful without a single flaw. She's an ugly crier. So she's ugly crying, nose dripping, everything. She's just crying. She's absolutely destitute because she fell asleep in her homeland and woke up in a different country surrounded by some old dude who can't, like, stop talking about how pretty she is. And that would make me cry, too. And so the king starts to, like, get upset, and he's like, hey, don't cry. I just had you brought here against your will so that you could marry me. And she's like, yeah, I don't want to do that, because the king is old. And he's not very friendly. He's a little bit demanding. And she's like, yeah, I'm not into this at all. So yeah, I don't know what else to do. So Vasilisa tosses out this task, and she goes, let whoever brought me here to this realm, whoever took me from my home, let them go back to the end of the earth and fetch my wedding dress, which is underneath a giant rock in the middle of the sea. I'm not going to get married without that wedding dress. It's my wedding dress. I've already picked it. You have to understand, when girls plan their wedding, they really plan their wedding. And the king's like, whoa, okay, that's a strong demand, but you know what? I got the guy. The guy is right here. He's in my court. I promoted him. So yeah, I'll definitely send him back to go get your dress. That's important to me. If it's important to you, it's important to me. And so the king calls for the archer. He's like, hey, go to the end of the earth where the sun rises, and in the middle of the sea, you're going to find a giant rock. Underneath that rock is Princess Vasilisa's wedding dress. Bring that back to me. Also, bring it back quickly, because I want to get married to her right now before she changes her mind, obviously. And if you do that quickly, I'll reward you richly. I'll give you half the gold in my kingdom if you make this happen, because I want to marry this woman I've never met, who doesn't know me, and I'm clearly like twice the age of. I want to marry her right now. I'm at least twice her age, if not 3 times her age. I don't even care. I want to marry her right now. So make it happen, and if you don't, I'll take my own sword and I'll cut off your head. And the archer goes back to his horse. And as we know, he's a big crybaby. So he's crying to his horse. And he's like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die for sure this time. There's no solution for this ridiculous request. And the horse is like, yeah, we're just going to do this again. Okay. Why are you crying, master? Like, what's up? Why are you so sad? And the archer tells him what happened. He's like, the king wants me to go and get Princess Vasilisa's wedding dress from the bottom of the sea. And the horse is just like, son of a bitch. I told you not to pick up that freaking feather. And yet, here we are. And I kept telling you it was going to get worse. And you don't believe me. And I'm telling you right now, we're going to go to the bottom of the sea. But it's still going to get worse. So the archer and the horse, right again, thrice 9-time lands, all the things. Nobody knows how long it was. That whole thing, yada da 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 da, all over again. They get up to the shore of the sea. Vasilisa's boat just sitting there. Nobody stole it because everyone knows it's hers. And as they're standing on the shore, a lobster comes out of the sea and is like, hey, I'm just going to be passing by. And the horse is like, no, and puts his tail, like puts his hoof on the lobster's tail. And the lobster's like, oh my god, this is oppressive. Please do not kill me. Please don't stomp me to death. Which, like, same. Lobster fears, my fears. I don't want to be stomped to death by a horse. The lobster doesn't want to be stomped to death by the horse. In this story, I'm the lobster. So he's like, please don't kill me. Please, I will do whatever you ask. And the horse says, in the middle of the sea is a giant rock. And underneath the rock is Princess Vasilisa's wedding dress. Bring that back to us. And the lobster's like, yeah, totally, awesome, yeah, I 100%. Please stop stepping on me, please. And so the horse picks up its foot, and the lobster goes over to the ocean and roars. I don't know if you guys know this, but lobsters can roar. At least they can in fairy tales. And a whole bunch of lobsters and crabs and other crustaceans show up, and they come all crawling onto the shore. There's like a big wave of crustaceans, at which point they should have just teamed up, formed a giant like megazord crustacean, and then like brought down the horse oppressor that was stepping on them, but they didn't do that. The lobster was like, hey, we need to go to the bottom of the sea and get Vasilisa's wedding dress. And all together as a unit, all these crustaceans go to the bottom of the ocean, and they come back within an hour with the wedding dress. It was no feat for them to get, because they live in the ocean. They're cool with that. They can get down to the bottom, and together as a unit, they can move a big giant rock to get this magical golden wedding dress, which was perfectly dry because it's magical. So the archer gets a dress. They ride back home on the horse. They really didn't have to do much this time. It takes nondescript amounts of time, but apparently it was very quickly, because the king was very pleased when the archer brought him the dress. And so he presents it to Princess Vasilisa, and he's like, hey, I have your dress. Look at it. This is a beautiful dress. The archer got it for me. Isn't he a cool guy? So now will you marry me? And Vasilisa's like, ew. Actually, I won't. Because I am, I'm so offended that I was brought here against my will that I want you to punish the person who brought me here by boiling them alive in a big giant cauldron full of water. And the king's like, you want me to boil my best man alive? The guy who does all the things for me? And she's like, yep, that's what I want you to do. I want you to boil your best guy alive for the crime of bringing me here against my will. Which, like, you might be wondering, why would she do that? Why would she boil the archer when she could boil the king? But no, she says boil the archer alive. And so the king thinks about it for half a second. And he's like, yeah, okay, no problem. I want to marry you so bad, I will murder the guy who made all of this possible. If it means that you'll marry me. So he orders a giant iron cauldron to be filled up with water, the water to be boiled, right? And as soon as it comes to a boil, he's like, go get the archer. And as soon as it begins to boil, they go and they're like, hey, archer, it's time to die. So they bring the archer in, and he's like, a sensitive guy, okay, so he's crying, and he's like, I'm so freaking unlucky. Why did I pick up that freaking feather? How come I never listened to my horse, who's clearly the smartest person on the planet, even though it's a horse? And the king's like, I don't know. I'd listen to the horse, but it's not mine. So, as he's brought before the king and Vasilisa, and they're about to throw him in the pot, he's like, king, please, please, if you have to kill me, I understand, your bride is demanding my death for some reason. It's not really my fault. I was just kind of doing what I was told so I wouldn't die. But if you have to do this, I ask only that you let me speak to my horse and say goodbye before I die. And the king's like, yeah, okay. So the archer just is left to go walk all the way down to the stable by himself, and he's crying the whole way there to go say goodbye to his horse. And the horse is like, let me guess, it got worse. And the archer's like, it did get worse. They're gonna kill me now. They're gonna kill me. There's no task. I just have to die. And the horse is like, I did tell you to not pick up that feather. And the archer's like, yeah, that's not helpful. Could you stop being so mean and stop telling me I told you so? I know that I messed up. I have accepted responsibility for that. That's my bad. I should have listened to you in the first place. And the horse is like, that's all I wanted to hear. Don't worry about it. How is the king gonna execute you? And he's like, they're gonna boil me alive in a big giant pot full of boiling water. And he's like, oh, don't worry about that. You're not gonna die. And the horse is, I don't know if you guys know this, it's an interesting theme. It's popped up on the channel before when I did Young Woman, Young Man. The horse is a horserer, which is a horse sorcerer. And he just does a spell and tells him, don't worry, now that I've done this spell, you're not going to get scalded by the boiling water. And the archer's like, okay, I'm just going to go on faith with that, and maybe we'll talk about how you're a horserer later, and maybe that's why you're a talking horse. We'll just talk about this later if you're right and true and accurate and what you just said to me. And the horse is like, yeah, trust me. Trust the process. Magic. So the archer goes back out of the stables. Turns out the guards were waiting for him. They didn't trust him 100%. They fetch him up. They take him all the way up to the cauldron. The king is like, toss him in. They toss him in. And he takes a little dip. And when he jumps out, he's fine. And he's better than fine, you guys. He's not just, fine, but he's fine. He comes out looking better than ever. Super handsome. Now he's, 3 times as handsome as the most handsome person you can picture. He's on level with Princess Vasilisa now. He's so freaking good looking. And, the king sees what happens, and he's like, oh, wait a minute. You jumped in the water and came out freaking gorgeous. This girl's beef with me is that I am old and not that good looking. And maybe because I abducted her against her will, I don't know. I'm gonna jump in the cauldron of boiling water and come out youthful and good looking, and then she'll have to marry me. There won't be anything to argue about, because look how good you look. If you look this good and you're just a peasant, I'm gonna look amazing. So the king jumps into the cauldron of boiling water and dies. He dies immediately, because it was boiling water, you guys. And as soon as he dies, Vasilisa's like, hey, crazy circumstances. I kind of knew this was going to happen. I knew when I saw your horse that it was a horserer, and that everything was going to be fine. Also, I also enchanted the water so that nothing would happen to you, because I really enjoyed our talk on the beach, and I think we had like a real connection. And well, do you want to get married since I have my wedding dress here? And the archer's like, kinda, yeah, you're the most beautiful woman in the world, and I don't have any prospects, and now my oppressive king bully is dead. Like, yeah, we should get married. Definitely, totally, 100%. I don't even have to ask my horse about this decision beforehand. I feel like this was his plan the entire time. So, I'm just going to go with it. I'm sure he approves. Everything is fine. You guys, the horse did approve. But more than that, after the king just, boiled himself, turned himself into soup, everyone was like, who should be the new king? Now that the king is dead, he wasn't married. He had no children. And then a couple of people were like, hey, Archer, don't you have half the wealth of the kingdom? You should be king. Also, maybe make your horse co-king, because it seems like your horse did a lot of the work for you. But you should be king, and you're marrying Princess Vasilisa. She's a princess. I think that makes everything legitimate. And everybody nodded and agreed, and they all thought it was a good idea. So the Archer became the new king, and him and Vasilisa lived happily ever after. The end. And the horse maybe got a promotion to co-king, because he should have been. It didn't happen in the story, but in my story, the horse were co-king, because the Archer is hopeless without him, and he just cries about his problems instead of trying to solve them. So yeah, I think he needed the horse up there on his own little special horse-shaped throne. I don't know what that will look like. I don't really know how horses sit. I don't want to know. I'm not going to look it up, because it's not my favorite topic. But yeah, that's the end of the story, guys. It's an interesting one. It definitely is another callback, which I think is really interesting. A lot of the stories in this region are like really sort of interwoven. And there's a lot of connective tissue between these stories, and you find that a lot in folklore and fairy tales and stuff like that. When you start to dig through it, that there's a lot of overlap and things that sort of echo other things, which is, more to the aspects of fairy tales and folklore being passed down through oral traditions, and people sort of adding their own spins and their little spice and their regional flavors to the stories that we're like really familiar with. So if you haven't heard Young Woman, Young Man, it was a really long story. I told it. It was a 2-part story. It's in the Storycraft playlist. I would check that out if you want more magical horse stuff and maybe the origin of the horserer. And you guys, the horserer isn't just like a thing that I came up with. I mean, I came up with the words. The words are mine. But the theme of magical horse saves the day is actually like so common that there's an Orange Thompson Uther type for it, and there's a couple other stories in that category, which I don't know if I'm going to get to all those stories. I'm not trying to finish the category of magical horse stories. That's not something I want to do, but it is something worth looking into, especially if you like the type of story where the magical horse saves the day. I would look up the Orange Thompson Uther type for this. I could actually tell you guys about it right now if I was being a cool person who does their research and stuff. It is Orange Thompson Uther type 531. So yeah, if you wanted to look up more of those magical horse stories, that's where I would start. But this story is interesting to me, not because it's particularly a strong candidacy for like Vasilisa as a strong character in folklore, because she's really kind of a background side character. She doesn't do much in the story except for try to make these ridiculous demands to sort of dissuade the king out of marrying her, and the king's like, I got a guy the whole time. Which, like, if I was her, I'd be so frustrated by it. Like, I also don't blame her for being like, boil your guy alive, because it seems like you're going to solve every problem with your guy, and I don't like that, because your guy is really effective at solving problems, especially when the problem is picking me up and taking me from my home and dragging me to a different land to demand that I marry you. Unremarkable king that you are. Like, I totally get why she was like, boil that dude. But also, since she kind of spelled the water herself, she says, which I would also say if somebody jumped out of the water alive and I was like, oh, I thought you were gonna die. I meant for you to live the whole time. Please do not come after me, you terrifying immortal creature. Because that's kind of what I think she was thinking. But according to her, she knew that, like, the archer was gonna be fine. And maybe her and the horse were in cahoots the whole time. I don't know. I do think it's funny that at the end of the story, the horse is like, oh yeah, I've had magical powers this whole time. Magic spell. You're good. Because I feel like a magic spell might have come in handy at any point in time beforehand. But also, like, when the archer was bending down to pick up the feather in the first place, a horse kick. A horse kick would have also been sufficient at this moment to be like, hey, dummy, don't do that. But maybe the horse knew that Vasilisa was going to be the end prize at the end of this. Not that I think it's great that she's the prize, because she's a person. But, you know, fairy tale's got a fairy tale, so all those things happened, and here we are at the end of the story. And that's basically what I wanted to say. It's a weird way to wrap up a trilogy of Vasilisa stories, because she's not, like, an active player in the story. And the story is, in my perspective, more about King Bully and the Horserer than anybody else. The archer is not even named in the story. And he's the hero. So, like, you know, not that the horse is named either, but I feel like the Horserer is more of a character. So yeah, it's not a strong way to wrap up Vasilisa stories, but it is another story where Vasilisa comes into play, so there she is. And I've seen some retellings or, like, imaginative sort of stretchings of the story, where she does take a more active role, where she's the one who has to go hunt down the Firebird, because the king's like, you're not doing anything, and she's his daughter in the stories, and sometimes. But, like, most of the sources I found had this as, like, the story I told you guys as the actual, like, root of that story. So I think those are just sort of derivative versions where people were like, what if Vasilisa had more agency? And here's how we got there. But I do think maybe some of those stories, too, are crossovers of this story and then the Vasilisa the Beautiful story that I told you guys last week, where they had to, like, evade Koschei the Deathless and all the things like that. Like, I feel like some stuff in those other, like, spins of this particular story about the Firebird got, like, overlapped with those themes of, like, Vasilisa having agency, which I really would just like. I like the stories where she has agency. I think Vasilisa the Wise is my favorite, because she's just a good kid who solves her own problems and then ends up marrying a king in the end because she wants to. And that's how that happened. But yeah, at this point, I'm just rambling about Vasilisa, and I'm going to jump out here. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces. If there's a story that you would like to hear on Storycraft, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I'm still working through requests, and as long as I keep getting requests, I will continue to do requests. Granted, this request became a spin-off request, especially because there was demand for other Vasilisa stories and the Baba Yaga, so that story will still be coming, because there's a couple of extra tales about Baba Yaga that I would like to tell you guys. But that's going to be it for me, guys, because my voice is starting to fry. And I'm hungry, so I'm gonna get out of here. If you made it to the end again, though, I appreciate your faces. I really do. And I'll catch you guys next time. Happy crafting. Bye.